Now, friends, we're going to continue our journey through the book of Romans. Last week was a challenging week, and this week has some challenges as well, but I pray it's really encouraging. I pray you leave here with a heart full of hope. I want to read a few lines to you. These lines were written years ago. I do not yet love you as I ought, Lord. I am still entangled in what I should not love. I fail continually, yet I rise again in God. Be killing sin, or it will be killing you. Even as a Christian, I often struggle with the same old sins, but I have learned to run to Jesus faster. I often feel myself to be the biggest sinner I know. The soul is often in great distress, for though it desires to do good, it finds itself doing otherwise. If we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. The sinful self is so deeply rooted in us that it is never fully eradicated in this life. And no man knows how bad he is till he has tried very hard to be good. One does not surrender a life in an instant. That which is lifelong can only be surrendered in a lifetime. Who said these lines? Paul? Sounds like Paul. And there's a reason. This is not singular. The who is not singular. This is a medley of the words of many faithful followers of Jesus. I do not yet love you as I ought, Lord. I am entangled in what I should not love, St. Augustine. Then I fall continually, yet I rise again in God, Hildegard of Bingen. Be killing sin, or it will be killing you, John Owen. Even as a Christian, I often struggle with the same old sins, but I have learned to run to Jesus faster, Corrie ten Boom. I often feel myself to be the biggest sinner I know, famed preacher Charles Spurgeon. The soul is often in great distress, for though it desires to do good, it finds itself doing otherwise. Teresa of Avila. If we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. John from 1 John. The sinful self is so deeply rooted in us that it is never fully eradicated in this life. A.W. Tozer. No man knows how bad he is till he has tried very hard to be good. C.S. Lewis. One does not surrender a life in an instant. That which is lifelong can only be surrendered in a lifetime. The wisdom of Elizabeth Elliot. See, what's important to notice and powerful to understand is that these quotes, they don't come from someone who just started following Jesus. They're not spiritual novices. They are not those who have not yet learned the disciplines or matured in their faith. These are the words of the mature, the faithful, the battle-tested, people who have walked with God for decades. And yet, when they speak honestly about their interior life, they sound as if there's something of a civil war going on. They sound divided. They sound like people living in the tension between what they love and how they live, between what they want and what they want. In other words, they sound like Romans chapter 7. And if we're honest, they sound like us. Because what many people begin, when they begin to follow Jesus, there's this quiet assumption. There's this expectation that the struggle with sin is just gone. It's just going to go away. That temptation will disappear. That obedience will come easily. That all the hard stuff is behind us. But then something strange happens. It doesn't disappear. And in fact, in some ways, the struggles intensify. You find yourself saying things like, I want to be patient. Why do I snap at the people I love the most? I want to trust God with everything in me, but why does anxiety still tighten my chest? I want to leave behind these patterns, these habits, these sins, and yet why do I find myself returning to them again and again and again? And we begin to wonder, like, what's wrong with me? Maybe the question is, am I really a Christian? Maybe I'm not even saved. Romans 7 answers these questions, and the answer is not condemnation, it's clarity, and it's hope. So, before we get into it, a caveat and some context. This portion of Romans chapter 7, the latter half of chapter 7, is historically one of the most debated passages in Romans. Because what we're going to see is in this passage, Paul speaks in the first person, so he says, I, over and over again. And Christians have long asked, well, who is this I? Who's speaking here? Some say it is Paul before Christ, Paul before being saved, Paul before knowing Jesus. And it's speaking from his experience. Some say it's representative of all humanity under the law, all humanity before they come to know Christ as Savior. But throughout church history, many have understood this to describe a form of experience of somebody who is truly a follower of Jesus. Someone who is a follower of Christ. Yet they are engaged in a struggle with sin. And I just want to make it clear today, like that's the view that I'm taking. After struggling with this text for months and excavating the Greek and looking at the context and the flow and all those things, and having conversations with many of you and some other pastoral friends, I come to the conviction that is what's happening here. That the I here is, yes, it's Paul speaking from his own experience, but also rhetorically representing a follower of Jesus experiencing the pains of learning what it means to rely on the Spirit and not rely on our own strength. This is because it makes a lot of sense what Paul says. The I here, is one who delights in God's law, in their inner person. They want to do what is right. They hate sin. And this sounds like a follower of Jesus, but it sounds like a follower of Jesus in a fight, learning to truly live. Now, the flow is going to help us here. So, how does this fit into the whole book at large? The first 5 chapters of Romans are all about how all humanity needs salvation. Jew, Gentile, religious, irreligious, everybody needs to be saved. And everybody is saved by grace. Everyone is saved because of the work of Jesus, his life, his death, his resurrection, his ascension, the sending of his Spirit to dwell within us, to give us true life. Then chapter 6, we saw where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. And Paul defends grace here. He says, look, grace is not a license to sin. It is a liberation from sin. It is not permission to live as you were. It is a power to live a whole new kind of life. Well, that took us into chapter 7, where we learn that the law is not evil. It's good, but the reality is the law is powerless to save, and the function of the law is to diagnose us, to show our need, and then to point us to Jesus. The law functions like a mirror that shows us where we're all muddied up and all messed up, and it points us to the water, the cleansing water of the grace of God and Christ himself. Now, with that said, I think what I'm about to say here will help us understand, because here's the flow of chapters 6, 7, and 8. You don't want to look at chapter 7 alone. You need the surrounding passage to understand the argument that Paul is making. So in Romans 6, here's a brief distillation of it, a very brief distillation. In Romans 6, we learn that because you are united with Christ, sin is no longer your master. So live like it. Live free. Then in Romans 7, we learn that even as a believer, you will struggle with sin. Your own strength is not enough. And if you're living on your own strength, it will make you very miserable. And that's why he then will go into Romans 8, and we'll be in it next week. The Spirit empowers you to live free and assures you that nothing can separate you from the love of God. So that's the flow, that's the outlay of the chapters. And with that, let's now read our passage, and then let's walk through it and let its realism and hope encourage us and minister to us today. So we're going to be in verses 15 through 25 of chapter 7. Here's what it says. For I do not understand my own actions. For I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now, If I do what I do not want, I agree with the law that it is good. So now it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells within me. For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh. For I have the desire to do what is right, but not the ability to carry it out. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing. Now, if I do what I do not want, it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells within me. So, I find it to be a law that when I want to do right, evil lies close at hand. For I delight in the law of God, in my inner being, but I see in my members another law waging against the law of my mind and making me captive to the law of sin that dwells in my members. Wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then, I myself serve the law of God with my mind, but with my flesh I serve the law of sin. All right, so a lot to untangle and unpack there. Let's get into it. Verses 15 and 16, the struggle is real. The struggle is real. Paul begins with just raw, vulnerable honesty. I don't understand myself sometimes. Like, why do I do the things I do? He expresses confusion and frustration about himself. I wonder, have you ever felt that way? Like you know what is right to do, but then you do the exact opposite? There's someone you love and you treat them poorly, or you go to that thing again that you know is just going to hollow you out and collapse you inward on yourself. You know it's wrong, but you do it anyway, and you're like, what is my deal? Why do I keep doing this? Anyone ever have that experience? The middle schoolers were in here first service, and all of them were like, that's me! It was great. It was a great moment. There is a gap between what the I wants and what the I does. I want to do what is right, he says, but I do what I hate. And notice, he doesn't say, well, I don't care about sin. It's fine. He says, I hate it. That means something has changed. This is not the sentiment of an unchanged heart, of a stony heart, of an unfeeling heart. Before Christ, sin may have been ignored or justified or been unfelt, but now that it's alive, there's resistance, there's grief, there's conflict. And that's not a sign of someone who's not saved. That's a sign of someone who's alive. Like, you know the feeling when your foot, your hand, something falls asleep, right? And it's like numb. And then you start to shake it around, and then it starts to come alive. What do you feel? Pain. You feel the pins and needles. The numbness is going away. You're starting to feel the aliveness. You're like, oh, this hurts. And you're like, oh, but it's coming back. It's alive. It's the dead flesh, the dead heart that doesn't feel these things. Think of it someone like who's trying to play the guitar. They're stumbling all over the fretboard. Their stumbles on the fretboard don't show that they're not trying to play. They show that they're trying to play. They show that they're trying to learn. They show that they're trying to grow in this thing. So the stumbles are signs of life. And so we begin here to feel the weight of this refrain. I see the good, I want the good, but I don't do the good. And I think at the most natural level, we can identify with having conflicting desires. So recently I've been trying to change my daily rhythms. I'm trying to get up and do the healthy stuff like right away in the morning, work out in the morning and instead of in the evening. So I try to get up like super early. And I'd have a ton of water first thing. I just start with water. Then I go into the garage and I work out and then get a shower, get ready for the day, eat, have my devotions, my time with Jesus. Then after all that, then I have coffee after like I've woken up naturally, right? So that's my plan instead of, sleeping in a little bit, then doing devotions right with coffee, and then trying to work out in the evening after I put the kids to bed and actually play whack-a-mole for 2 hours trying to get them back into their beds, right? Okay, so just this week, the alarm went off at like 0:30. And I get up and I stumble to the counter in the bathroom and I literally lean against it and I think I was deliberating for 10 minutes. I'm like, do I go downstairs? I got nothing in me. I love how it feels to get the endorphins going and to feel fully awake, and I'll feel real generative, and it's gonna be good. And it's like, I have nothing in me. Like, it's gonna feel so good to get, like 10 minutes, like just, it was like a golem moment, like back and forth, right? So I know it's good for me to do something, but then there's also this desire to want and do something else, right? So, you know what I did? What did I do? This is a test. I got up and I just killed the kettlebells for an hour. No, I didn't. I went back to the bed, I pulled the covers over my head, and I enjoyed every minute of it till my wife pokes me and goes, "Don't you have things to do? You should get up." Like, I wanted the good. I wanted the wakefulness. I knew what was good for me, but my body and like everything within me just said, go back to bed. A divided self, competing desires, right? I could have pushed through the fog of exhaustion like I did on other days, but I didn't. And so I know this analogy falls flat because Paul's talking here about a spiritual reality of inability to contend with, but I think you can understand the idea of conflicting desires within. So what Paul's saying is that we can have a right desire, but there's the issue of how. How are we going to go about these good things? It's an issue of power and reliance. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. The flesh, we should talk about that. What does he mean by the flesh? Verses 17 through 20, a power dwelling within. So now it is no longer I who do it, but sin who dwells within me. For I know that nothing good dwells in me. And then he qualifies that. He says, that is the flesh, or my flesh. So here Paul's explaining what's happening. He says, look, there's a force that is at work within him, some alien power that's seeking to destroy him, which he is often complicit with. Well, we need to understand that he's not excusing bad behavior, and he's not saying that he's not going to take responsibility, but he's acknowledging that there is a true war. There's an enemy that is still trying to destroy him. And we need to be really wise with interpreting what he says here about no good thing. He says, no good thing dwells in the flesh, verse 18. This is really important that we understand this term flesh. The word does not mean simply his biological body. The word can be used in that way, meaning like a physical, biological body. But he's not saying the human body is bad. God made a mistake when he made the human body. Everything spiritual is good. Everything matter is bad. And someday you'll get rid of all this, blah, blah, blah. That's not Christian thought. This is good. Jesus has a resurrected body. We will have resurrected bodies. So what is he saying here? The word flesh, that Greek word is sarx. What is sarx in the way Paul uses it? It's the self trying to live apart from God and apart from God's power. It's the self relying on its own strength. It's a without God life, a without God way of inhabiting this world. It's our sinful nature. It's the shadow that still lurks within. It's what is opposed to God. That's the sarx. So when Paul says nothing good dwells in my flesh, he's not saying there's nothing good within me as an image bearer at all. He's saying if I rely on myself, if I rely on my own strength, my own effort, my own willpower, and if I follow the old ways, apart from the Spirit, I do not have what it takes to live this life of love that I am called. I do not have the power on my own to live in a righteous way, to please God. It's only through trust that we can please God. That cuts against everything we naturally believe, right? Because we think if I just try harder, if I just life hack a little harder, if I just get more disciplined, if I just apply myself, I can do it. And Paul says, no. You cannot do it. There is a deep inability and lack of power when you are in self-reliance mode. Do you see what he says in verse 18? He says, I have the desire, and then he goes on to say, but I do not have the ability. I don't have the ability. So you can want to be patient, know it is good, but on your own strength, still lose your temper. And you can want to trust God in all things, and yet when you're on your own strength, you're still feeling anxious. Paul really wants us to get this into us. So verse 19 and 20, he repeats what he said. He says, "For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing. Now, if I do what I do not want, it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells within me." The point here, again, is he just wants us to get this idea in us. He wants us to see it clearly. But this isn't a one-time struggle that he's talking about. This is a pattern. This is something that we're going to be dealing with. And so the point of these verses is to break our confidence in ourselves. That might sound like wrong or negative at first because of some of the things that we're taught in growing up. But the whole idea is like, you can't fix this. It's not, I got this. It's like, he's got this. God has got this. I don't have this. I can't overcome this. I can't make this right. And that's where true hope comes in. When we are hopeless in our own ability to save ourselves, then true hope floods in. You know, the very first of AA's, Alcoholics Anonymous' 12 steps, the very first one, super important. It says, I am powerless and my life has become unmanageable. But if you're coming in and you're going, I got this, you're going up in flames. You're falling down. The true hope comes when you say, on my own, I have no hope. I don't have this. You have this. You have to do something. Help me. That's where the hope is. And that brings us to verses 21 through 23, the realization that this struggle is a war. It's a war. And we have to be really careful here now with this passage. You can see I've highlighted some in green and some in red. Paul uses the word law in two different ways. Thank you very much, Paul. It's super clear. He uses the word law in two different ways. So we need to define our terms clearly. The law is here in two different ways. First, in the red, law is a principle or pattern of how things work. A basic principle about how things work. But then he also uses law, this word nomos, to represent God's commands, right? God's revealed will, the Mosaic law, the commands that we see in the Old Testament. Those ones are in green. So he uses them in different ways. Now, that's not all that unusual when you stop to think about it for a moment, because we do the same thing. So take, for instance, the following phrase. The thief ran from the officers of the law, but the law of gravity caught up to him at the building's edge. Okay, right? The officers of the law. Well, that's the green, the commandments of the land. The you shall not do this and you shall do this, because if you do these things, man, then you're going to go to jail. And so the officers of the law enforce those specific commandments. But the law of gravity, that's the basic principle of how things work. So we use this kind of terminology all the time, so no need to go, well, Paul has to use the same definition throughout. He's using these two terms to show us something, and here's what he says. He says, look, I find it to be a law, a basic principle of how things work, that when I want to do right, man, evil is always right there. It's like sin crouching at Cain's door, ready to pounce when he's about to do something right. For I delight in the law of God, God's good commands, him telling us how to live. I delight in those in my inner being, but I see in my members, like in my sarx, another law waging against God's commandments, his law. And so he says, like, I'm captive to the law, the basic principle of sin that dwells in my members. So we see here this collision. There's an enemy. These are principles of warfare that he's putting forward. Though the law, the commandments of God are good and are inside my mind, there are other principles at play. The power of sin is resisting and attacking and trying to destroy. Two forces at work. One that loves God. The other something alien within that resists God, the shadow, and they're at war. I mean, just think about a body, a physical body that's fighting off infection. There's bacteria, it's viral, or there's a parasite. There's two things happening within the immune system. What is the immune system doing? It's fighting for the what of that organism? It's fighting for the health of that organism. There's this power, this immune system, this incredible thing happening in here. But that bacteria or that virus or parasite, that infection, what is it doing? What is it trying to do? It's destroying that organism from the inside out. There are two powers within the same body that are at war. A divided self. And this passage, friends, is really important for us because you know what this passage does? It helps normalize the struggle. If you feel this tension that you're failing or that you're falling away from God just because there's a struggle or that you're not saved, like this passage helps us because we have to level set expectations, because when your expectations are not level set here, it's going to cause loads of damage. And so what we need to see is a with God life is not a without struggle life. A with God life is not a without struggle life. And friends, some of us think this. And you know, when we think this way, what happens is then when we do struggle, what do? We go, well, I shouldn't struggle. I'm a Christian. So I'm going to hide this. I'm going to stuff it down. I'm not going to confess it. I'm not going to walk in the light. Then I'm going to walk in despair and anxiety and frustration and hiding. And then I'm going to disintegrate from within. But it is normal for anyone following Jesus to struggle against sin. See, when we begin to follow Jesus, it is not the end of struggling. It is the end of futile struggling. It means the beginning of a long and victorious battle against sin. With God life is not a without struggle life. Now, with this truth, we come to the turning point of the passage. Verse 24, the end of self-reliance. Wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? Here, Paul reaches the end of himself, so to speak, reaches the end of self-reliance, acknowledges the impotence and the inability that comes with relying on one's own strength. He cannot win this battle with indwelling sin unless he's empowered by the Spirit of God to overcome it. So he uses that word wretched. And for some reason, over time, we think that word wretched means you're useless, you're worthless, you're a worm, you're unloved. But actually, the technical definition of the word wretched means you're enduring trials, troubles, and you're feeling afflicted. So if I ask you this week, like, how's the week been going? And you're like, I'm feeling wretched. I'm like, no, you have worth. No. You're saying, like, I'm experiencing troubles and trials. I'm feeling afflicted. And that's what he's saying here. He's like, I'm feeling these trials, these troubles. I feel afflicted and miserable because the way that I'm going about things, it just puts me further into the pits. So what does he do? He cries out for help. And notice he doesn't cry out, what do I do? What's the right technique? What does he do? Who will save me from this body that is clinging to death? Who will deliver me? He cries out for another. He cries out for a Savior. Who will deliver me from the sin and death that still rattles around and riots within me? The Spirit of the living God, the Spirit of Christ. He is my strength. He is my strength. See, there's a way to live a Christian life in which we're not relying. Let me say it this way because that might confuse it. There's a way we as Christians can live that is not relying upon the power of the Spirit, and we're going about things on our own strength and wondering, why can I not overcome these things? We're back to our old without God way of living, and we need to learn to walk into this new way of life, of walking in step with the Spirit. So we have to learn to live in constant reliance upon God. But we have this old muscle memory, and you guys know how muscle memory works, right? It's the old ways, it's the old thoughts, it's the old patterns that keep us relying on ourselves and not relying upon the empowering presence of God. So if you've played a sport before, you know how important muscle memory is, right? That's why you try to practice the right thing over and over and over again until it gets into your nervous system. But you know, if you try to change that swing, you know, there's an awkward period where you're going from the old to the new and you're like halfway in between and you're like, why is this so hard? Well, you're trying to get the new muscle memory into your body. In high school, and I know this will shock a lot of you, but I used to play sports. Gasp, I know, right? I played tennis, and at one point my high school coach is like, we need to change your serve because I don't know what you're doing, but that's not how a serve should look. And so it got rough for a season, right? Because there was that awkward thing where I wasn't serving right, I was missing the mark, but you know, eventually I lived into and got the new serve into my muscle memory. But there'd be times where I would go back to the old, and what would happen? That ball would miss the mark and hit the net or the back of my doubles player's, partner's head, right? Not a good thing. So you do realize when we slip into those old patterns, when we slip into old muscle memories, you do realize those occasions, right? It's when you're tired. What happens when you're tired? You go right back to old stuff. When you're distracted, right? We go right back to old stuff. When we're stressed. Anyone been stressed this week? Right back to the old patterns. We need to live intentionally attuned to God every moment and go, you got to help me through this. Help me live into this new muscle memory. Have you ever been driving a car when the power steering goes out? Oh man, it's tough, right? I mean, you can kind of turn it a little bit, the car's still moving, you got the gas and the brake, but everything's strained, everything is exhausting, you're working harder, you're overcorrecting, and ultimately you got to just pull over. That's what living in the sarks feels like. It's just depleting. But then the power steering comes back on, and now you have assistance rather than resistance, and now you can get back on the highway, right? Or think about the difference between a rowboat and a sailboat. What powers a rowboat? The rowing, right? The rowing, so you row harder, you move faster. You stop rowing, you stop moving. And that's how many of us picture the Christian life. More effort, more striving, more discipline. But the reality is a Christian life is much more like a sailboat. What's powering the sailboat? Right? The wind. You still work to a degree, you raise the sail, you adjust, right? You do all these things, but the power comes from the wind. The animating force comes from the wind, and it is the wind that's moving you across the sea that you partner with while you're on the boat doing the things that you need to do. My friends, many of us are trying to row our way through the Christian life. And we wonder why we're only a mile offshore, exhausted, hopeless, because there's a whole Atlantic in front of us. Self-reliance exhausts us and is fruitless. Self-reliance destroys us. Spirit reliance empowers us and bears fruit. Put down the rows, start working on the rigging, and let the wind move you. That brings us to verse 25, the strength we need. Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then, I myself serve the law of God with my mind, but with my flesh I serve the law of sin. So here's the answer, right? Here's the cry, the answer to the cry for help. Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ, because God has done for me what I cannot do for myself through Jesus Christ, and now given me his empowering Spirit. The strength that overcomes sin is not willpower. It's spirit power. We need to get this into our bones. Romans 7 shows us the struggle because Paul wants us to see the need for the empowering presence of God, that we are called to live by the Spirit of God, to keep in step with the Spirit of God, that we might produce the fruit of the Spirit because we are grafted into new, healthy stock. And he's going to take us into Romans 8, which is so awesome. We cannot wait for next week, but it's all about life in the Spirit and what this looks like. So what does this mean for us today, friends? Well, one, it means getting into our minds, level setting expectations, and knowing that a with God life is not a without struggle life. Jesus says you will experience struggles, you will experience hardship, you will experience pain in this world. But he also says, I will never leave you, and I will never forsake you, and I will be with you until the end of the age. And it means we need to get into us and understand that beginning to follow Jesus does not mean the end of struggling. It means the end of futile, hopeless struggling. And it means the beginning of a long, victorious battle against sin. Because before Christ, you struggled alone and had no power to overcome the darkness. Now you struggle with the presence of the Spirit that pushes back the darkness and is our help in time of need. Before Christ, sin ruled. Now in Christ, sin can be resisted. Before Christ and his cross and his resurrection, there was no real victory. But now there is. And so if you wanted to say, what's the application to this? I mean, simply but difficult and beautiful and empowered by the Spirit, it's this. Don't be surprised by an ongoing struggle in your life if you are a follower of Jesus. Don't be surprised that you will wrestle with sin. You are a person in process till the day you see him face to face. Don't rely on your own strength. Self-reliance will fail you. Depend on the Spirit to empower you. He will give you the ability to do what he's calling you to do. And keep praying. Don't lose heart. At one point, Jesus, the elders and I were talking about this week. Jesus is about to tell a parable, and it says he told them this parable so that they would keep on praying and not lose heart. Keep praying. Keep crying out, help me. Help me. Help me do what I cannot do on my own. I trust you. I need you. I rely on you. And as I was thinking about all this week, something came to mind. I was reminded of something from history. Maybe this will help us as we move to a close. I thought of June 6, 1944, what we know as D-Day. Before sunrise that day, thousands of Allied soldiers crossed the English Channel and they landed there on the beaches of Normandy. The smoke was thick, the water churned with chaos, all hell broke loose. The men stepped out of the boats into the gunfire and into uncertainty and into fear. It was brutal, it was costly, but it was a decisive invasion. That day changed everything. Because those beaches were taken, the outcome of the war was no longer in question. The decisive blow had been struck. The enemy's defeat was, in a very real sense, secured. Yet still, the cleanup battles had to go on. There were battles that did not end that day. There were months of fighting ahead, town by town, field by field, skirmish by skirmish. Paris had to be taken, the Battle of the Bulge, and finally the fall of Berlin. Resistance, setback, long, exhausting battles still had to go on until nearly a year later. Until came VE Day, Victory over Europe Day, when the war was fully and finally over. Friends, for the Christian, the death and resurrection of Jesus and the giving of his Spirit, that's our D-Day. The decisive battle has been won. Blood has been shed. The good sacrifice born of love to liberate untold people happened in the life and death and the work of Jesus Christ. Sin has been defeated. Death has been broken. The outcome is secure. Yet, we are not at VE Day. The war is still being fought without and within. There's still battles, still holdouts, still resistance, still struggles, still an enemy on the move. Romans 7 here is life between D-Day and VE Day and experiencing the turmoil we feel when we rely upon our own self instead of remembering that the battle has been won, the battle has been secured, and we have been empowered to live well in this conflicted world. So here's the good news. You are not fighting for a possible victory. You're fighting from a secured victory, and that changes everything. It changes your tone. It changes your sense of hope. It fights against cynicism and despair. It loads every moment with eternal meaning. You are not fighting for a possible victory, going, I wonder how this is going to pan out. You are fighting from a secured victory, which means there can be joy flooding even in the most painful moments where you're struggling and going, I can't do this. And then you remember, He can. He will not leave me or forsake me. Friends, you're not alone. Galatians 2:20 says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives within me. And the life that I now live in this flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and died for me. The struggle is real, but the strength is greater. So friends, the war within you does not mean you are losing or lost, that you're not saved. It means you are alive. The tension you feel is not the absence of grace. It is the evidence of it. Because the same grace that saved you is the same grace that sustains you. And the same grace that has awoken you, it's the same grace that empowers you. Praise be to God. Father, we thank you for your love and your grace. We thank you that you have not left us alone in these struggles. You are good, and thank you for your presence. Thank you that you are with us always. In the name of Christ. Amen.